Hello, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to start the session on computer-based approaches to composition and score structuring. The first paper is entitled Synthesizer, Physical Modeling and Machine Learning for a Core-Based Synthesizer in Virtual Reality. And it will be presented by Giovanni Santini from Hong Kong Baptist University of Hong Kong.
So thank you very much. And this research is a kind of spin-off for me because I usually deal more with augmented reality and gesture-based performance and notation. But so I went involved in this kind of research after a hackathon in Chicago where with an electrical engineer we developed this kind of toy, let's say. But then I thought there was some interest inside it, so I went a bit deeper and redeveloped the whole thing in virtual reality. So essentially what this synthesizer does is translating color into sound by mapping RGB values to a lot of parameters for Modalis, for 5 different physical models developed in Modalis, in MaxMSP, by using the Wikinator that, for people who don't already know it, is a machine learning tool for exactly doing that, mapping very easily and very fastly any number of input to any number of output, theoretically, of course. So why that? The first reason for me is using the color space, which in the RGB coding accounts for around 16 million combinations, for investigating a timbre space. So if you have a mapping that is responsive enough, you can actually have as many combinations in the timbre space as colors are there in the RGB coding. Of course, there are some other kind of possibilities. A picture can be a sort of score, let's say. Using this tool can be another way, for example, to read the picture as a form of graphic score. So if you think about Huddlestock chromaty or, I don't know, something from Kurliansky or this kind of graphic notation that sometimes can be an interesting way, another way to look at that. Also, of course, is a very intuitive tool, doesn't pose any kind of entry level for anyone because it's just a matter of, as you will see, pointing in virtual reality towards the picture and getting the sound. So there's nothing to learn for the user. And this means, to some extent, and maybe with a more properly targeted development, might be also suitable for amateurs or other kind of people that don't have musical background for making music quite automatically, but still with some response, so having some form of feedback and having some way of interact with the final result. So of course, synthesizers come from synesthesia. All of you know what it is. And especially chromesthesia, which is the usual way we intend synesthesia, going from sounds to color. My synthesizer is doing the opposite way, but still is a reference. Two things I want to point out. They are very important for me, and especially one, synesthesia is always different in different subjects. So I will develop better on this later, but essentially most of the applications that have been developed doing this, because of course this is not a new idea, it's a very old one, at least 300 years old, but probably some 1,000 years old if we think to Pythagoras. but usually there are some specific algorithmic way for mapping wavelengths, for example, of the light to wavelength of sound. But that doesn't really, isn't really, let's say, psychoperceptual way of doing that. Because people that really have synesthesia have it in a very specific way. And that specific way is consistent for each subject. So, just for seeing a bit of background here, I will quote 3 different experiences in the past. One is color organ from Bishop, 19th century. So this is the kind of mapping was carried out. It's also not reflecting the actual, frequency wavelength, because blue should be, highly saturated blue should be the lowest one, and highly saturated red should be the higher one. What actually Bishop did was trying to follow a bit the Newtonian approach, where the spectrum was divided from a prism, using a prism, in 7 or 12 different ranges, and then those ranges were kind of poetically attached, which is not bad. So this was the actual tool. Actually, in this case, it was not neither going from sound to color or from color to sound. It was actually producing them at the same time. Each key was connected to the pipes, and at the same time to some colored lights, some lights that were sent through colored glasses. And so, through this effect, it was able to produce the two things. And now, newer thing, happy phase composition. So actually the algorithm here translates multiple pixels into stripes according to their RGB values. And then what is interesting in this case, very arbitrary of course, but there's actually no unarbitrary way to do that. It's mapping melodies or pieces of melody, phrases, or however you want to call them, to colors, to some specific values of RGB, which are actually then translated into a kind of key factor, key is the Greek letter, that then is kind of translated again to sounds. And also there was a final composition that was actually coming from the set. And then there is a master's thesis from 2014 talking about this application that is able to zoom in inside the picture, count all the pixels with all the RGB values of each pixel, take a histogram, and then use that for balancing the output of 7 different sound files. Each one of them is associated to one specific color band, let's say. So actually, is a kind of, let's say, simple multispectral analysis, if you want to see it. Also, here there are 8 values. The white was linked to silence. So when the white value was very high, all the other levels were put down. These are the references. Now, talking more about all these kind of easy or algorithmic or objective mapping between light and sound, some problems that make it impossible to actually make an objective conversion. For example, the wavelength of light are in less than an octave. So whatever you want to do, unless you want to maybe use another kind of octave, which is 74 to 43, you're probably gonna stretch it or remap it. So there are many applications where this less than an octave is actually split over 88 pitches, of course, the channel range. So now I will actually play something from my application and then dig further in how it is developed. I hope the sound comes out properly. The functioning is pretty clear. So how is this realized? Of course, for the virtual reality part, I use Unity, which is a development framework used a lot for video games, but is extremely good for VR applications because that actually takes into account many of the rendering issues one might encounter, if you want to develop it all on your own is a challenge. Of course, Wakinator, as I told before, is this tool for mapping any number of input to any number of output by using machine learning So linear regression or polynomial regression and neural networks. Of course, maximum speed with Modalise, everything is connected through IC protocol. Now, what happens in Unity? So here, for the people who don't really know it, you see, let's say, the editor window. It's not a tutorial, so I will just show a couple of things. But what I want to show is that this hand one is actually the controller, the left controller. And it has attached some scripts. So essentially, in Unity, a script is something that determines the behavior of a game object through code, in C#. So it has many scripts on it, and there are two are important. One in particular, this is the update function inside the draw raycaster script, which actually takes the colors. So what it does is actually using a raycaster, which is a straight line that goes towards infinity from a game object. You can use that for seeing if you are intercepting something or not. So using this raycaster, if you're pointing toward a picture, you can select the point in the picture that you are intercepting. You can take the coordinates of its UV texture, which is the two-dimensional texture, no matter whatever it happens later. It could be wrapped around the sphere, for example, doesn't matter. The 2D UV texture is the coordinate of the UV coordinate is the coordinate of the 2D texture. And by comparing that coordinate to the original image, you get the RGB value of that pixel. What happens later is that by using this send RGB OSC, the values are sent to the Wakinator. So this is the interface of Wakinator. There are 24 output parameters, 3 input parameters, of course, RGB values. So essentially, the Wakinator works by recording input values and recording the output values that should match those input values. Once you have the training set you want, it can be even very small. You train the model. Now, this is not exactly what we usually see for machine learning, recognizing tests or whatever. You need 1-2 million pictures, have a huge training set, have also a test, small test set for testing the accuracy of the model, and then you just need to know how accurate is that model. In this case, it is different. It's just for producing very fastly interpolated values. So even if you have just 3 or 4 values, that's enough. The machine learning tool will just output interpolated values in the middle as accurately as possible. So these output values are actually controlling parameters in modalities. So this is the full set of values. There is a main value which is very important. I will talk about this a bit later. All the other are, I would say, standard parameters like number of mode of vibration, the dampening, which is called the global loss, the dampening of the whole instrument, high frequency loss, etc. Now, the MaxMSP patch has, of course, runs the modalist models. Plus, according to the main parameter coming from Wakinator, decides where this bar is. You see the white crosswidth tube, and then it goes on with the other models. According to this position, it takes just the 2 instruments that are nearer and makes a cross synthesis, balanced with the original signals. It means if it is in the middle, it's a cross synthesis. Otherwise, there is something more of that signal or something more of the others. Now, just to see everything in action. Now, of course, we talk about going from color to sound, having 16 million combinations, and blah, blah, blah. Actually, there is no free lunch in life. So, essentially, there are some limitations. One of them is the RGB limitations. I would say there are 2 of them are most important. One is the fact that there is always a standard illuminant, which is the basis for all the RGB mapping. It means if you change the illuminant, or even if you just change, let's say, an application, if you change a printer, this representation might change. And the other one is that RGB representation as a gamut. It means this triangle. There is a limitation in the actual number of colors and in the actual saturation the RGB representation can deliver. So, given these limitations, I mean especially the limitation of the standard illuminant, plus also the limitation that, for example, if you want to use physical sensor, a real sensor for detecting colors, beyond the standard illuminant, you have another, let's say, variable, which is the illumination conditions of the room where you are actually performing your detection, plus the printer. So you never know exactly, I mean, there are ways, but they're quite complicated, to be exactly sure that the colors you're going to represent in the computer are actually the one that then you're going to, detect with your sensor. Actually, if you use a real sensor, every time you change the light, or if it's just late in the day and you did your first detection in the morning, you have to recalibrate everything, just because the white has changed. So you're measuring everything according to white, but you never know exactly what that white is. So in VR, of course, you overcome completely this. I mean, of course, you can change the light inside the application, but that's your decision. And you can be perfectly sure of what white is that white, because you program it. And also, you still have your limitations for the RGB coding, but whatever you do, your results are always consistent, because you're always using the same system under the same circumstances. Even if you change the picture, the overall system doesn't change. And it is actually very simple to change a picture in VR. You can even take a wall-long picture and just put it inside this application. That's fine. While if you want to do that in reality, that's a bit more problematic. Also, VR allows the use of raycasters, which essentially is a preliminary form of telekinesis. And you don't have that in real life. So these are all things that make all the process easier also. Some considerations I want to make before concluding. So although I have tried this with people, there was no formal evaluation with questions or whatever. What I can confirm anyway is that, of course, this application doesn't give any problem to the user, except for trying to make it interesting. I mean, 16 million combinations are very theoretical. Actually, many of them are similar. Essentially, whenever you give an application to someone, it's a problem of game design. So, when you have an application that is interactive somehow. So, of course, after 2-3 minutes, it may be the reason for using it. If you can't program your own physical models and try out all the combinations that can come out from different mappings, etc., if you just use it, after a couple of minutes, there's nothing more to discover unless you provide a new mapping or whatever. So another thing I wanted to point out, but maybe you have seen that already in the previous examples, still that is a problem of game design. You can use pictures as kind of scores because you can relate to different colors, different events. But still, I think there's some work to do in order to improve this aspect. Now, also, we have talked about limits of RGB. There are other ways to look at colors. There are HSB, which is hue,
saturation.
Thanks, hue, saturation, brightness, and hue, saturation, value, hue, saturation, lightness, whatever. And there is multispectral analysis also. So there are other ways to look at colors. Those might be improvements. As I said, similarity of numerous combination, maybe using more instruments, or a greater training set. I used just 5 models. I could still use those 5 models with 10 training points, for example. Pixel by pixel color analysis might be another limit. Maybe it would be interesting to explore pixel clustering, image generating, other forms of more advanced image processing. And one I think huge limitation here is not having the possibility to change pitch now. That's because load system changing parameter at every video frame, which is at least 30 times per second, plus changing pitch, was leading to a slightly unstable model. So, for that reason, for now, I limited it. Of course, this is a timbre-centered. Okay. Of course, this is a timbre-centered application, but timbre comes also from pitch, so that might be a good hint for the future. Also, yeah, carrying out an evaluation, a serious evaluation, would be actually something to do in the future for understanding better the potentials. So, that's it.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
I mean, you know, timbre is a synonymous for sound color.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the instrumental type is mapped into colors. Did you try to associate this classical association of sound and colors in your model? So a violin would have a certain color and the piano another, because this is a very difficult problem. The classification of instrumental colors is really not solved yet. Yes, very infinite space.
Yeah, of course. So, for example, if we come back here, what I did was exactly to map in some specific colors to a specific state of our model. But I think in general, because every synesthetic subject is different, actually you cannot just classify it one way. So the idea here for me was to actually always allow to remap everything. Tomorrow the tube might become green and the signal might become white. It's fine. But still, I think this connection between colors and timbre is prolific in another sense, that somehow you can, with the application ID, somehow you can go from a three-dimensional space of colors, which allows for a lot of combinations, into another space that is the space of timbre, where you always find yourself having some interesting combinations just because you program 5 of them. All the others come from the algorithm. But this is not just for deciding that must sound in one way. It's more mapping different spaces, let's say.
Very interesting topic. That's about the association between timbre and color. Maybe possibilities for training set for machine learning and responding could be not like have direct association, but an indirect thing. Just for example, we react like more immediate, strongly when we see a red color instead, for example, white or green. The same way we hear like brass sound, we have a like stronger reaction if we just hear like nice kind of flute sound, for example. So in this sense, it would be interesting to consider our steps with our reaction as a criterion to associate some colors with sound.
I think that is a very interesting suggestion. I think the implementation might be a bit hard because either you decide in advance and then it's fine. Otherwise, an algorithmic way that allows you to be surprised, but at the same time to maintain this kind of, let's say, reaction index, I don't know, is a bit complicated because you might have the same reaction from a very loud brass chord or from a very loud bass drum strike. So, but that's really it would be actually a very interesting problem to solve. How to match very different things according to a parameter which is surprising.
Okay, it's the time, but perhaps one more short question.
So the idea of transforming color to sound is really great. I was just wondering if there is a way to make it work in opposite way. If you can actually make colors to sound, make paintings to sound. For example, play something and the computer would make a painting for you.
Actually, I think for this there is even a max tutorial. I think there is really because actually sound to color is, I don't know why exactly, slightly more practiced than sound to color. Sorry. So sound to color is used more often than color to sound. I don't know why exactly, but there's no real preferential reason, I think. But anyway, for that, there is even, I think, a max tutorial or a max patch in the examples. So it's, yeah, but the short answer is yes. There are many ways.
Thank you very much.